Okay, welcome everyone for today's Tao Te Ching reading. And then this week we will continue our reading from chapter 19. And then as usual, and please raise your hand to read your own translation. And then after that, Amang and I will share our version of translation. And then we can have a brief discussion. When we discuss, please focus on the chapter we read, which is chapter 19. So as usual, Kwang, please. Thank you.
Okay, so it's the usual translation by Professor Mose Roberts, stanza 19. Refuse the wise, dismiss the intellect. The folk will reap 100-fold. Refuse kin kindness, dismiss due service. The folk again would love as child and parent. Refuse craft skill, reject all gain. No thief, no robber would be found. These three as texts do not suffice. Commandments must be put in practice. Plain appearance, humble habits, owning little, craving less. Reject the teaching of the young, and thereby suffer no distress.
Thank you, Kwang. Anyone have want to have your own reading? Joe, please.
Okay, I'm going to read the Derek Lynn translation. It's number 19, correct?
Yeah, please.
Okay. End sagacity, abandon knowledge, the people benefit 100 times. End benevolence, abandon righteousness, the people return to piety and charity. End cunning, discard profit, bandits and thieves no longer exist. These three things are superficial and insufficient. Thus, this teaching has its place. Show plainness, hold simplicity, reduce selfishness, decrease desires.
Thank you, Joe. I find out I liked Eric Lin's translation, especially this one. Any other translation? No? Okay, so let me share our translation. Chapter 19. Amang.
You might want to make it just a little larger. Just
Okay.
for the people. I've got mine here. Chapter 19, Uncarved Block and Plain Cloth. Without sagehood and knowledge, people can profit 100 times more. Without ren or yi, people will naturally practice filial piety. Without polished and profitable goods, robbers and thieves do not exist. These three rules are insufficient because each of them belongs to its own category. Appear in plainness, embrace genuineness, possess less, demand less.
Cease learning and have no more worries.
Cease learning and have no more worries.
Okay, so this one I put in the bracket. The reason is we are not sure this phrase belong to this chapter or next chapter. Okay, so I put in both and put in the bracket. So I will let you decide, which one make more sense. And when I read this one, I do. Okay, first I'd like to explain the title. The title called Pu Su. These two words actually is a very common word. Okay, in today's Chinese, basics means you are plain, you are not showing off, you keep low key, keep a low profile. That's today's Chinese will use it, and which is original means. If you know Chinese character, this word is related to the wood. So that means uncarved block. Okay, that's the block. The wood is not carving polished. And the su is related to the clothes. That means a plain clothes which not dyed, okay, in white, usually it's white when the raw clothes. So this word, these two words combined with the uncarved wood, block or wood with the plain clothes, we call 朴素, which is simple, simplicity, low profile, not showing off. That's the meaning of today, and I believe it's also the same meaning in the ancient. And you can see this word is coming from this chapter. Okay, so that's the first thing I like to talk about. And the second thing, I see this one is very related, and sometimes you see opposite. Okay, to the chapter 19 we talked about last week, right? We talk about when the great Tao decay, there are people of Ren and Yi. When knowledge and intelligence are praised, there are great hypocrisies. When the family relations are in harmonic, there are people of filial piety and kindness. When country fall into obscurity and chaos, there are loyal ministers. So in chapter 18, the text talking about when something bad happens, then we need some virtue. For example, filial piety, we need Ren and Yi, which is Confucius morality. We need to praise the loyalty. Okay, so that's this kind of morality is necessary, or when some bad thing happen. Okay, uh, and today chapter 19 is talking about, in a way you can see they are similar, in a way you can see they are kind of looking at a different direction. It's talking about don't praise, right? Its teaching is don't praise sagehood and the knowledge. Otherwise, right, people will be poor. Okay, so he said don't praise the give up the sagehood and the knowledge. People can profit more. Okay, give up or abandon the Confucius morality. People will naturally practice filial piety. Give up or without the profitable good, there's no more robber or thief, right? So I hope you get, if I suggest you contemplate between chapter 19 and 18. Okay, think about the moral teaching here, okay, in political way, right? So in a way, you may see like use Confucius teaching as an example, right? Without Ren and Yi, or we will say without Confucius morality, people will naturally practice filial piety. In a way, if you enforce the Confucius morality, people may not really do it. Okay, that have this kind of sense, because this morality is part of human nature. Human will do it. Okay, so it's kind of difficult to explain if you try to write an essay, but uh, between these two chapters, we can think about the relationship between the policy and the morality here. And sometimes the policy will cause the opposite situation. For example, if you impose too much, force people to do something, and the people may do something opposite. Okay, so that's what I read from here. And finally, I like this one: appear in plainness, embrace genuineness. Okay, so 见树抱朴. Okay, that's reflect to the title. These two words, right? The plain clothes and uncarved block. Okay, 少私寡欲, possess less, demand less. Okay, I think that's the teaching. As people don't show off, don't try to own too much, don't demand too much. And finally, to cease learning and have no more worry. I'm not sure it's related to this one or related to the next one. So I put in the bracket and then I will let you decide, which way is better. Okay, so that's what I need to talk about this one and amount, please.
Thank you, Jason. And my apologies for forgetting. In every other translation, you won't see that final line, cease learning and have no worries. Typically in this chapter, most attach it to chapter 20, but it has a greater place here in terms of context than it really does fit well within chapter 20, as we'll see. Excuse me. About the title, 自曝. Pu is the type of pu that inspired Benjamin Huff to write the Tao of Pu. That concept of plainness, of simpleness, was his inspiration for uniting those two homonyms into his pithy text about Taoism. As far as this translation goes, I really do like our translation. I think it works well, but I want to make the justification I've made for many people before. And if you're a first timer here, when you choose to retain Chinese as opposed to translating it into some English approximate, we've gone over this over the years. Certain words carry too much of their own connotation and weight in the original Chinese to be hand-waved as a way, as approximately this in English, because it loses so much context. Here, even if you know no Chinese, even if you haven't discovered what ren or yi are from context of the text, you, in the multiple translations we've done now, just seeing those words reappear like they did all the way through the Analects, you get cued in very quickly. This is directly speaking to Confucius and to Confucians of the time. It is a counter-argument to their argument of what morality was, what good leadership was. And it does a really good job in leveling a rational argument against their position, even though it is not necessarily a intuitive argument against their position, because the position of Confucianism is exalted moral individuals should work to better themselves and therefore be better leaders as a result. This advice is, you can overdo it. That's the shorthand version. When you keep exalting knowledge, when you keep exalting learning, it's a Wendigo. It's an absolute impossible thing to ever gain mastery over. And so it becomes a pursuit for its own sake if you're not careful. In doing that, you kind of lose the forest for the trees. You keep working on getting the next degree, getting the next title, getting the next nugget of knowledge at the expense of the people you're meant to be helping. Ren as a sort of human-heartedness and Yi as a sort of righteousness. If you abandon those, don't start saying, respect your elders. People will just naturally start respecting their elders, especially if it's mutual. That filial piety happens naturally without a lot of obstruction. Animals cling to their parents humans are any other animal. And without polished goods or polished or profitable goods, yeah, if there's nothing in the vault, nobody's coming in to steal it. This is Taoism 101. Be plain, be uncarved, be natural, and invest in loss. Invest in the loss of your possessions and invest in the loss of your preconceived demands. And what you'll find is that you cease worrying and you cease convincing yourself you don't know enough.
All right, thank you, Amang. There's two more things I'd like to add on. You may find the translation is a little bit different on the last one. I translate as possess less, demand less. Okay, the Chinese word called 少私寡欲, and I know a lot of translation will translate this word 私 as selfish. So don't be selfish, and then so-called curtail your desire. So I don't think the text is talking about selfish because I'm not sure. I don't see the entire Dao De Jing is talking about don't be selfish. And I think selfish, this as a concept, may not be there, you know. So I'm not sure. So, but I would like to translate to see this word as personal property, because this word is related to the agricultural growth. Okay, if you know the Chinese, it's related. So that means during that time, the farmer, they have some portion of agriculture. Okay, is the crop belong to yourself. Some belong to the public. So this word has been used as personal property. So here's talking about having less personal property, and then don't acquire too much, something like this. So that's my interpretation of this one. That's why I make the possess less, demand less. Second thing, I didn't explain this one, this sentence, okay? I translate as these three rules are insufficient because each of them belong to its own category. So three rules, okay, because I read this one as a political teaching, teaching the ruler, the prince, right? Don't teach them, okay, 仁义, don't teach them, don't promote the profitable goods, don't teach, don't promote the sagehood, okay, because these three things or a lot of time will cause the problem because they belong to certain category. Okay, don't do that. That's the way I read it. But of course, people may have the different interpretation, and the different interpretation will lead to different translation. So that's the way we do our translation. So right now we open to have question, discussion. I know it's probably a little bit difficult on this chapter, and also notice the next chapter also difficult. So welcome any question, comment, and then what do you learn you want to share? That's all welcome, and please focus on this chapter. So our order is from Darren, Kwang, and Madeline. Darren, please.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for those interesting comments there. I liked Jason's remark that we could very well read this along with chapter 18, and it's fruitful to do that. One thing, so I just want to focus on one aspect of this, which is the use of how T. So that's filial piety. Again, my Mandarin sucks, so I'm just pronouncing Cantonese. How T. Can someone pronounce it in Mandarin? Is it? Hang on.
孝慈,
孝慈. Okay.
The
孝慈.
first word, 孝, means okay. The translation is very difficult. 孝 means how the children, okay,
Yeah.
treat your parent. 慈 means how parents treat your children. Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. And as any Chinese person will know, how is like a central idea for any person growing up in a Chinese household. So that's a very important idea, not just philosophically, but just as a lived reality for Chinese people, the filial piety thing. But it's interesting because chapter 18 and 19 are they seem to use this idea differently. So I just want to read that. So in chapter 18, it says, 六親不和有孝慈. So in the Derek Lin translation goes, the six relations are not harmonious. There is filial piety and kind affection. So like as Jason was explaining earlier, like when there's kind of disorder, it's saying it's only when there is a disorder, or as the first line says, the great Tao fades away, then there is these supposed virtues that come forth, but it's not the most basic thing, or it's not the most basic moral reality, or whatever you want to call it. But then chapter 19 sort of says, how T is sort of secondary in chapter 18. But then, okay, in chapter 19, it sort of has a more positive idea of this filial piety and thing. So it says, so in chapter 19, it goes, 主人希以民福孝慈. So it says, end benevolence, when you end in benevolence and abandon righteousness, the people return to piety and charity. So it's saying that, so the chapter 18 is saying you get filial piety when there is disorder, and that's like the gist of that chapter, is that it's like a secondary thing. That's not the most basic thing. But then in the chapter 19, it says when you get rid of these the basic Confucian ideas, yan and yi, then you get filial piety. So that's something you want sort of in chapter 19, whereas in chapter 18 it's sort of saying it's something you don't want because it's secondary, it's only something you get. And so my thought about this, of how they're sort of construed, like their connotation is different in chapter 18 versus 19. So one way, maybe I'll be interested to hear what other people think, or if you think I'm I'm reading this wrong, but one way for me to square the circle, or whatever that expression is, circle the square, I don't know, square the circle, is to think about how the uh the Taoists here are sort of reappropriating certain Confucian concepts and making them their own, and saying that this is like the new Tao in a way, because Confucius had a Tao that they talk about, which is what the path that Confucius charted. They call that the Tao, but of course the Tao for Taoism is very different, but they still use the same word. So I remember last week I was saying the first line of chapter 18, for example, it says Dai Do fight, which means when the Tao fades away, as Derek like translates it. Um, um, so they're saying when the Tao fades away, that's when you get these Confucian virtues of like benevolence, humanity, or whatever, or humaneness. But they're but he's challenging the Confucian use of the word Tao there, because he's saying when the Tao fades, that's when you get righteousness and humaneness. So you immediately get keyed into the thought that this is a new Tao, like it's a new order, or a new idea of that concept. And so maybe coming back to filial piety, so he uses the exact same characters, but they're sort of the valence is different, right? It's a more positive valence in chapter 19. So I wonder if it's doing the same thing as with concepts like Tao. It's like saying this is a different kind of how Ti. And it's not the Confucian kind. It's a new, more natural, as he says at the end of chapter 19, it's a sort of more authentic and simple kind. It's not like the duty kind. It's not like you should do duty to be filial piety. It's something more spontaneous and natural. And because the valence is different, I wonder if it makes sense to translate chapter 19 to translate those words differently too. I don't know, maybe this is dangerous, but like maybe just say something like, I noticed, for instance, the Ross Roberts translation that someone read, it translates it as, how does he do it? I have to find it. Oh, we'll love again as child and parent. So yeah, maybe that's better. If you see perhaps how if you agree that maybe the chapter 19 is like challenging the concept of filial piety, just like, you know, concepts like Tao and other things are challenged by Taoism. Anyway, sorry, that went long. It's
No,
probably a simpler way to put it, but I'm done.
I'm
Uh,
interested in what you had to point to, because yes, these are used polemically very differently in these two chapters. But I want to draw your attention to what follows after those three. These three rules are insufficient because they each belong to their own category. Each belongs to its own category. And that indicates that, yeah, maybe this filial piety thing that the Confucians want isn't a bad thing per se. It's the enforcing it that's really terrible. It needs to happen naturally.
Thank you, Amang. Thank you, Darren. Okay, so first, thank you, Darren, for a lot of explanation, and then I think that's great. And secondly, I think you read in Cantonese is great, even better than Mandarin, because we should know Cantonese is closer to the ancient pronunciation than Mandarin. Mandarin is very modern, which is far away from the ancient sound. Okay, so actually, that's a good thing. Okay, to read in Cantonese instead of Mandarin. So let's continue. Huang, please.
Okay, so I would like to say that this stanza, according to my understanding, is about the question of role models. Okay, what are the goals or the values and the ideals defined by the role models? And here, the three major doctrines of Chinese civilizations are once again Taoism, Confucianism, and legalism. I would like to say that the ideal of Taoism is nature or the natural or the spontaneous. The ideal or the goal of Confucianism is empire. So when you want an empire, you have to define who is superior and who is inferior. It doesn't mean that it is the absolute law in nature, but that's the law of the empire. And that law of the empire is, or laws as of the empire, have been written for what is called the gentleman. So at the start, there is the distinction between who are the gentlemen and who are not the gentlemen. And inevitably, sadly, it gives rise to what I call the rat race. Okay, if you have a certain kind of behavior, and that kind of behavior would classify you as a worthy person or as a gentleman, well, we are never in the mind of someone, and we have plenty of historical cases when you have outstanding officers of the empire having behaved perfectly during 42 years, but at the 43rd year of his career, he would do something monstrous would, that would destroy everything good he has done the 40 years just before what he has done in his 43rd year. And legalism, precisely, is about the fact that the people who are not considered as gentlemen within the laws of the empire would be submitted to harsh laws. Okay, that is legalism. Legalism is what? Is those people don't have the feel of awareness for having their own, let's say, self-master behavior. So we will have to set a list of punishments to be used in case they don't obey to the law. Because once again, why are there laws in a society? It's because there are crimes, okay? There would not be laws against murder or against thievery if there are no murderers and if there are no thieves. There would be no laws against adultery or against incest if there are no adultery or no incest. So the presence of a law forbidding something is something very obvious in history and in anthropology, that because the corresponding crimes was quite, let's say, present, but hence the law. So that question of role model here has been well defined by the fact that yes, the rules, the written rules or the spoken rules are not enough, because it has to come from your heart and from your soul. But put yourself at the place of a ruler. If it doesn't come from your heart and from your soul, does he would be he capable to put that into the heart and the soul of, let's say, at least 60% of his subject? He would have to apply some legalist rules. And of course, the people who are capable naturally of that, they are not really the subjects of legalist considerations, and not even of Confucianist considerations, because Confucianism is, we still have the hope that by emulation, okay, because emulation is a nice word for competition, but for competition in terms of good behavior, we still have the hope that by emulation, by competition, it would make people behave better. And the legalist position is that let's forget about emulation and competition. Just state very clearly the punishment that the person would get if he doesn't act according to the law. And the true person having what is needed in his heart and his soul, well, it's not a topic for Confucianism and for legalism, because that person would simply be naturally what he is or what she is. I stop here.
All right, thank you, Kwang. We have Madeline and Nick. Madeline, please.
Yes, thanks, Jason and Aman, for another terrific translation. It's been a fascinating discussion. I had a few thoughts. I was wondering if you would put your translation up on the screen again. Yeah, in that first line, your first sentence, I was wondering about the word profit, because when I first read it, the word profit made sense. But when we got to the third line of the translation of polished and profitable goods, then it didn't seem to quite fit as well in the first line. And I was wondering if maybe the word people can learn 100 times more, or know or benefit 100 times more. If it weren't for the appearance of the word profitable below, I wouldn't even have noticed it. So that was just a thought on the translation. I was thinking that the fourth line of your translation, these three rules are insufficient because each of them belongs to its own category. I think this is about the evils of category making.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what yes, on one level, it's about what categories they belong to, and it's a slam on Confucius and everything. But on another, it's about category making and dividing the world. And when you think of these three different types of categories and the kind of in opposition to the uncarved block and plain cloth, the whole thing is almost like one of those riddles that does everything but mention the one key word. And here the one key word would be de. In other words, without the categories, the uncarved block and plain cloth, it would be your de that would, everyone would go into this.
Okay, thank you, Madeline. Okay, two great challenge to me. Okay, so yeah, you are right. That's a two word, D and D. I tried very hard. Whenever the same Chinese word, I want to translate to the same English word. Okay. So that's why people can profit. So this profit, Li, seems talking about a good thing. Okay.
Yes.
And the second one, okay, profitable good seems talking about bad thing. So in another way, I probably have to translate this word, okay, to another English word, which is the same Chinese character but different meaning, which means sharp. Okay. So without polish and sharp, okay, goods, or that means very. So probably this probably among I probably want to hear from you, right? Probably some other words like sharp,
Yeah,
okay, because it
I
means sharp.
I will say I think everybody's kind of circling around something that's pretty important in this chapter. It is a not so subtle way of attacking a foundational precept of Confucianism, which is this notion of the rectification of names, that you can make a thing comport to the name you give it. And yeah, I do think, I mean, it's made up of he and dao, so it's a grain and a knife. You can interpret that as sharpness, and that is one way it's used. But Li here, I do think, is meant to mean profitable or profit. And it's because you see these terms being inverted in their meanings between this and the previous chapter, that you get this sort of whiplash or disorientation of, wait, I thought this was a bad thing. Wait, I thought this was a good thing. And I think Madeline hit on one of the key fundamental ideas being communicated. Categorization is a project doomed to its own failure.
Okay, thank you, Mom. Okay, so another thing you can read is if we keep the profitable goods, rubber and the sheep do not exist. It it also shows Taoist anti commercial, okay, attitude, right? Because you sell goods to profit. That's the reason you have the thief and the robber. Okay, so you can see they see agriculture is good, the commercial, okay, this kind of business is not good. Okay, so that's the another attitude and to look at. And another challenge Madeline talk about is the category, right? I think my translate is a little bit different because also the Chinese is different. The difficult part is 属, okay, the Chinese word, and I have to translate as a category, or you want to translate as a department. 文, okay, I didn't didn't translate as superficial. Some people translate as pattern, culture, okay, and I translate as a rule means. So I read this line as something wrong, okay, because you want to govern. Okay, listen. If you I assume this chapter is a teaching to the ruler. So the teacher tell the ruler or the prince said, you make these three rule, right? Sagehood, Confucius morality, and profitable good as a rule is not sufficient. And then you assign each one to different department or different category. Okay, it's not good. And then we should do is appear in plainness, embrace genuineness. Okay, so that's the way I interpret the whole text, and that's why I make this kind of translation. But of course, there's many ways to understand, and then than any kind of interpretation is. I think the most important is that you think. Okay, I think that's important. So
Wow.
so Madam,
Thank you. I just had one more question.
please
Thank you. The word appear, I wonder if,
appear.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, go
appear
ahead.
in
Yeah.
plainness. Is it like the word face,
见
like an outward
Oh,
face to what you show to the world?
yeah, okay. So in the ancient world, this word in today's Chinese, 见 means see. Okay, I see something. But in the ancient time, or especially in the Tao Te Ching text, this word is the same as another word called 现. That means appear, showing. Okay, so that's why whenever I see this word, I have to translate as appear or appearance. So,
Wonderful. Thank you.
Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to follow up on the comment made by Derek earlier, which is on the relationship of this stanza 19 and the earlier one 18. Derek suggests an interesting way to connect the two by adjusting the connotation of the key concepts. I like to propose a different variation, which is to, keep same connotation of the concepts across the two standards, but recast the text slightly and to find out the logical relationship. So in standard 19, the one we just read, it's stated with a negation of certain behavior. But if we interpret that as a way to access Tao, and then the quote unquote Confucian values follow naturally. Yeah. So that's a positive statement of the primacy of Tao. If you have the Tao, it will manifest in the daily world. So the usual moral values would, manifest as well, and therefore, all is good. But if we go back to the 18, it says the same thing in a negative way, right? So if you lost Tao, right? So you may or may not have the other values, but there's clearly an anxious emphasis on those. But those are of a lower rank in the sense that they are not as primordial as the Tao, and therefore they are not sufficient. Yeah. So if you have the Tao, the other lesser value would flow naturally. But if you do not have the Tao, even you try to get the smaller values fixed or propagated, promoted, whatever, it wouldn't help to address the fundamental issues, whatever that is. So therefore, standard 18 and standard 19 are saying the same thing in different way without altering the exact connotations of those key concepts, Tao, piety, loyalty, whatever. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Kwang, please.
Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. Okay, I would like to come back to the notion of the rectification of names because that is really very interesting. And I would call that the kingly game. What is that kingly game precisely? Is provoking a creating an organigram, okay, like in a company or corporation, but it could be an empire, of course. When an empire is created, there is a name categorization that is called in Chinese "pan fen." Okay, pan fen meaning that each one has a position, and that pan fen is a place in the hierarchy. And having a pan fen mean that you have to create names corresponding to those places within the hierarchy. And by creating names corresponding at places within the hierarchy, that create inevitably an emulation or competition among those who are admitted to that competition, because once again, it's not everyone who would be admitted to that competition. But there is a certain overture compared to legalism, would be that if we have the power to enforce that, we don't even care to look for epistemological or ontological justification of the creation of our kingly game. So I would say that Confucianism is an attempt, a difficult attempt, a human attempt, to give a certain richness to the reality of power game, which sadly is very often based on power and on force. And here I exclude Taoism, okay, because those who truly have the spontaneous heart and the spontaneous soul of kindness, of service, but in the true meaning of the words, precisely because it manifests spontaneously from their heart, they are not in the kingly game. Okay, and even though the Chinese tradition, those people are called immortals. Okay, why are they immortals? Not that their body would not die one day. Okay, and the Chinese never believed that the body would not die one day unless in Taoist invention like the eight immortals and that stuff like that. But from the scholarly understanding, the immortal is someone that is not subjected to the kingly game. Okay, that is more the evolution of his mind. So he would not be a prisoner of the game of the society. That is the scholarly understanding. I'm not speaking of the folk beliefs in the immortal or stuff like that, which is rampant in China, I have to admit. But I'm speaking always from the philosophical perspective. So, of course, that rectification of names is ultimately impossible because the kingly game starts from a position of power and of force. Okay, I have the power to enforce it, but I don't want just to limit myself to punishment and rewards. But I want to make it a little bit more complicated and creating, by using names, a complex organogram. I
Okay.
stop here for now.
Okay. Darren, please.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to respond to what Nick said, who was responding to what I was saying. Yeah, I really like Nick's approach to this too. So not changing the valuation, or I was using the word valence, whether it's negative or positively valence. So not changing that, and reading it that way. And so when I sort of assumed this approach, what I one thing I see that might be going on is that in chapter 18, when he says, 大道廢有仁義, it's he's saying that when the great Tao fades away, um, there is benevolence. So the great Tao fades away, there's benevolence and justice. So what might be going on is that he's not maybe attacking benevolence or justice per se, and he's not attacking filial piety later on per se, like or attacking. He's not like devaluating them per se, but he's saying that when the great Tao fades away, there is something like the concept of benevolence and righteousness and humaneness, or there is the concept of filial piety. And then, which is why, like, I really like Madeline's room. So this ties to what Madeline said, right? Because so it's in so very much these chapters go together, it seems like, or can be read together. So Madeline was focusing on that, that crucial line, 此三者, like these three things, 此三者以為文不足，故另有所屬. So so Madeline was interpreting this as like, I think she was saying like it's about, it's like the the usual attack on like conceptualization of the Confucians and their focus on words. And I think I think Quan was saying how it's about, or yeah, or someone is saying it was about names again and rectification of names. So if you like, it ties into that, because you could read chapter 18 in that light, which is that it's the concept of benevolence and justice appears, rather than the plain and simple thing, as he says at the very end of chapter 9. So maybe that, so yeah, so I can see it. Yeah, so if I was approaching it the way Nick was doing, so I was originally saying he was actually reevaluating concepts like Dao and How or filial piety, but it could be that another way to interpret it is not reevaluation, but a distinction between the concept of it and sort of doing, and and just sort of like doing it as a duty, as a rule, rather than something spontaneous and natural. So maybe that could also be something that's going on. Maybe they're both, right? I just want to add one more thing. I know we should probably go on. I just want one more thing. I was about this. So and it's tied in with what my response to Nick here. So the very last says Gin So Po Po. So how did you guys translate it? Sorry, I have to bring how did you translate the
Let me hear
second
them.
last? Oh,
It's up.
pure and
Okay.
plainness embrace genuineness. Right. Yeah. So I'm just gonna say that when I think of the words so that's plainness, and pop, which is I guess genuineness, or like forthrightness, or like I like Pog. I like this character because I don't know why, this is just a connotation I have in my head. I always think of like plain wooden furniture, like just something simple and honest, like not unadorned, just like a log cabin or something like that. I don't know why. I always have that connotation when I think of this word, like Pog. And I think maybe in Cantonese it sort of has that, like that very simple sound, like Pog. I don't know. It's sort of like has that ring to it. And so I think another way to think, another like kind of critique might be going on here is, so Gin Shou Po Pok. So I think the show and the Pok have this like connotation of unadornedness, like something that's unadorned, like that wooden furniture I was talking about. So like this is an aspect of the Confucian um morality, because it's not just like do your duty, but Confucius was like do your duty, but it has to take place in all these specific ritualistic ways, and all these rules, and all these fussy things you have to learn about, like, and you have to like mourn for 3 years after your parents die, and you have to like not, you have to wear rags, and there's all sorts of all this like appear like, yeah, all this like ritualistic stuff. So I think another maybe, so just another maybe a thing on top of the other aspects, is that it's about like after he concludes in chapter 19 to sort of be this unadorned authentic way, and not the conceptual stuff, and not the sort of that's all like extraneous, and you just have to get the essence of righteousness, the essence of filial piety, which is different from the rule and ritual based idea that Confucians have. He's trying to like he's trying to bring forth a new sort of more spontaneous, natural way that these can exist. All right, I'm done, sorry.
I just wanted to respond to Darren to say Po is actually the name of the panda in Kung Fu Panda, and it was exactly for this kind of unadorned, unglamorized reason. It's this character that was his name.
So in Kung Fu Panda, the panda's name is Po. Okay. Okay, I didn't watch the movie because I don't like it. So anyway, but okay. So but anyway,
I have grandkids.
Okay, yeah.
Kung Fu Panda was about chapter 19 then.
So okay, I think Darren is right. This po is very important word in the Taoism teaching. In the Dao De Jing teaching, I would say Wu Wei and the Pu is the two important, if I have to summarize, right? The entire Dao De Jing, I say Wu Wei is a political teaching. For the personal cultivation, Pu is the key word. Okay, if I have to use these two things. So the second thing, I think that's why we spend so much time to talk about chapter 19 and chapter 18. The challenge or the key is how to read Dao De Jing and how there's so many different ways to read it. Okay, I think the reason is we don't know who is the audience. Okay, we know who is the teacher, and there's many teachers teaching, but who is the audience? Okay, so the way I translate on this chapter, chapter 19, I assume the audience is the young prince or the lord, okay, is teaching the ruler. So let's take the first sentence. Without sagehood and the knowledge, people can profit 100 times more. Okay. Oh, let's use this one would be better. Okay. I think that's the same way to read it. Okay, let's say I think okay. When the great Tao decay, there are people of Ren and Yi. Okay, so let's assume you as a student, as a ruler, when you hear this word, let's assume you agree. When there's no Tao, and the people will practice Ren and Yi. So what are you going to do? If you are Confucianist, you will say, yeah, since the Tao is decay, right? Let's teach people the Ren and the Yi, the humanity and the righteousness. Or if you are Taoist, you hear this one, you will say, oh, the great Tao is decay, so people practice Ren and Yi. Okay, let's resurrect Tao. Okay, they make the Tao go back. Okay, that's another way to think about that. But the big question is how to, right? Okay, so I think that's many way to discuss this one. And then, okay, so we have a few hands up. That's the kind of limited to Huang and the Madeline. And then we probably have to move on. And today we probably finish it to 19 because I know 19 is a difficult one. And then that's a totally different concept of 19. Huang, you want to say something?
Yes, 5 seconds. I would like to
Okay,
say
thank you.
that what Darren said about rituals is perfect because what are the rules of the kingly game? The rules of the kingly game are rituals. I stop here.
Thank you, Huang and Madeline, please.
Yeah, thanks. I was just thinking, well, how useful it was, what you just said, Jason, that the Wu Wei is really for the political and the Pu is for personal. And I was thinking of Darren's log cabin and the Uncarved Block. And one thing you have in the Uncarved Block is the original grain of the wood. It hasn't been treated, and it shows the growth patterns. And I think there was something in Feng Youlan about Li as a type of patterning, like a grain or a growth. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Darren, you have something quick?
Yeah, I'll just say something very quick. Yeah, I just want to say, so you were rereading chapter 18, and I just want to continue down. So when the great Tao fades away, there's benevolence and justice. I'm on the Derek Lin translation, and then it goes, Di Wei Che Yao Dai Ai. So like when intelligence or wisdom come forth, there is like a great deception or fakery or something like that. And so I just want to say that, so if you continue like adding that like that additional line, I actually think this is very significant for Madeline's interpretation, because it precisely jumps to this idea that it's like intelligence, it's like this thinking, it's cognition, and it's maybe something as the thing Madeline was talking about, conceptual. So I think, yeah, so I think yeah, this would be the sort of anti-conceptual reading of chapter 18 and 19, whereas I still think there is something to my original reading, the revaluation reading, but the anti-conceptual one is also really good, I think. So thanks, Madeline.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Since Paul is first time speaking, so Paul, please.
Very briefly, I know we're going on and on, but Just a quick question that I was quiet until what you just said earlier, Jason, made me want to understand something. Were you saying that these concepts like piety, righteousness, they're the 18, they're good things. And actually, if you've lost the Tao, this is kind of my question, is what they can help you get back there if you've lost it.
I'm not sure you can.
positive.
I'm not sure you can. When you
But-
get back, you can.
But like if you've lost the Tao, what do you do? Well, this actually chapter says those people are there because they use those concepts to help you get back to it. If you're already there, you don't need the concepts.
yeah.
I'm just asking
So
if that's kind of what you're saying or not.
yeah, so it's up to you how you can. If okay, let's say if you are you believe Confucianism, okay. So since Tao lost, then that's practice Confucius minority. Then we can go back to the Tao. Perfect, right? And another way, if you go back to 19, right? If you enforce this Confucius morality, okay, does it work? That's another question you can think about it, okay. And people naturally can do it. So another way to do is relax. Okay, let people do themselves. They will go back to the Tao. So again, same as political today, right? You have more control to enforce the social order, or you should less control, liberate the people. Let people do whatever they want to. Naturally, they will go back to the right thing. So I think same situation even today. We have the left, we have the right, and sometimes we try to do something good with tight control, then the other side will come back. We should that's liberate. I think in economy, in political, everything is happening this way. So it's I don't have an answer, but I think everyone should have, or another way to say is everyone have his own or her own answer, I think. Okay. So we have to move on. So chapter 19, and then I think we should chapter 20. We probably will finish on 20, and I believe 20 is I remember when 3 years ago when I translated this one, and I find out this one is very difficult. And when we discuss, we take long time to discuss this one. And then when I do the second time translation, and I also find out also very difficult. And amongst common and my common has quite a few different. And then we will see how to interpret this one. So let's read. Kwok, please.
Okay, so translation by Professor Mose Roberts, stanza 20. How distant from condemn consent, disgust, delight, how different. He whom others fear, he too has to fear. All is beyond reach and never ending. High in spirits seems the crowd, like celebrants at the sacrifice. All viewers on the spring rite stand. I alone, adrift with no sign of hope, deserted and without appeal, am simple as a newborn before its smiles. Dejected like someone without a home, the crowd seems sunny and spirited. I am sullen and low, and my heart without guide. The crowd so busy and eager, I drawn into myself, impassive, even as the spacious sea, unfettered like a restless wind. The crowd has more than it needs. I am left untended. The crowd has its way and its means. I am set in my ways and despised. Alone and apart from all others, I honor the life giving mother.
Thank you, Kwok. Any other one want to read this long uh, chapter? No? Okay.
I can. I thought someone normally reads the Derek Lin translation. I can do it if no one wants to do
Okay,
it.
so
I
there,
think it'd be
okay,
yeah,
please.
just to have someone to compare. Okay. um, chapter 20. Okay. Cease learning, no more worries. Respectful response and scornful response. How much is the difference? Goodness and evil, how much do they differ? What the people fear, I cannot be unafraid. So desolate, how limitless it is. The people are excited as if enjoying a great feast, as if climbing up to the terrace in spring. I alone am quiet and uninvolved, like an infant not yet smiling, so weary, like having no place to return. The people all have surplus, while I alone seem lacking. I have the heart of a fool indeed, so ignorant. Ordinary people are bright, I alone am muddled. Ordinary people are scrutinizing, I alone am obtuse. Such, such tranquility like the ocean, such high wind as if without limits. The people all have goals, and I alone am stubborn and lowly. I alone am different from them and value the nourishing mother. That's it.
Thank you, Darren. So let me share my screen. Okay, Alma, please.
Chapter 20. Wet nurse. Cease learning. Have no more worries. What is the difference between yes and yeah? What is the likeness between good, beautiful, and evil, ugly? What people fear, I cannot be afraid of. What a vast place without ending. People are bustling as they attend the great feast ceremony, as they ascend the terrace in spring. I alone, unmoved without involving myself, like a baby not yet smiling. I am loafing, fatigued, as if I have no place to return. People all have enough to spare. I alone seem to be at a loss. I indeed have the heart of a fool. It's so unclear. Ordinary people appear bright, but I alone appear muddled. Ordinary people are probing, but I alone am silent, rippling on the sea, breezing endlessly. People all live purposefully, but I alone am untamed, as if uneducated. I alone am different from them. I honor my wet nurse, mother's breast.
Thank you, Alma. Okay, so a few things we will see here. First, I put I think most of Chinese texts put this one 绝学无忧, cease learning, have no more worry. In previous one, I'm not sure, but it's a different kind of thing people may think about is suitable for chapter 20, beginning of chapter 20, because this one is talking about retreat from the uh, secular world, okay, retirement, this kind of thinking. So, and when you retire, you cease learning and you also have no more worry. Or you put in the chapter 19, okay, talking about be plan, right? Possess less, demand less, learn less, worry less. Okay, that's another way to look at. So we don't know, but I put in both so that you can decide. Okay, so a few challenge here. 为之与 are. Okay, so I translate as yes and yeah, but the proper way to see is 为 and are. Okay, some people translate as yes and no. What's the difference? Some people say yes and flattering, because are translated as 阿谀 means flattering. So my interpretation is kind of, I see sure is unsure, right? Sometimes you will say sure, yes, I'm firm. Is kind of like in the original words means not sure. Okay, something like, and then good and the bad, what's the difference? Okay, so here I think the author is talking about these two opposite things, right? How much different they are. And the last, this line is interesting. Okay, what people feel I cannot be afraid of. So sounds like they are anti-social norm, but on the behavior, they they don't want to be. They are different, but they don't want to become so brave, okay, and put yourself in danger. Okay, so people afraid of something, for example, you have a tyrant. You don't fight against the tyrant, okay, for sure, okay, for the Taoists. So some rule imposed is unfair, is not good. You kind of avoid, okay, but you don't fight against it. Okay, that's I think that's how it teach what people feel. I cannot be afraid. So that means you're afraid also when people are afraid of something. You are not like uh, fighting against something powerful. Okay, the second part, what the vast. So here is talking about the mood of the Taoist people, or you want to call it the Taoist sage, right? What a vast place, Huang. Okay. Some translation may consider as this one as crazy because Huang in today's Chinese means crazy, weird. Okay, but I think this one I take its original meaning. That means the raw land, the open land. Okay, so try to think about the land has nothing, but as a great plan, great place, and the people are busy attending the feast. Okay, and some translation translate sacrifice. Okay, because in during that time when you have a ceremony or sacrifice, the religious gathering, that's also the time for the great feast. Okay, and then people go outside to travel. Okay, so here he's talking about I alone, I'm unmoved, unmoved because he's not affected by the what people are busy doing. Okay, so just like baby not yet smiling like a young baby. Okay, so I think here is talking about just like young baby, keep quiet. I do my own stuff. They see. Okay, so I keep some people translate as fatigue, I think, or weary. Okay, so that means you are tired of something. You are not feel tired, retired, something like so. I'm going home, but I kind of take this word a different way. I use the word loafing or lazy, being lazy. That means you are slowly doing things. You are not doing rush, okay, because it's opposite to what other people doing, right? Other people are rushed to do something, and I take my time. I think that's this chapter is talking about. So the third part is going further, talking about he's different, right? So the ordinary people, okay, 俗人, okay, and 我, okay. So I translate as 俗人 means lay people, most of people, ordinary people, right? They they all do this, but I do this. They all smart, and I kind of play dumb. Okay, I think that's what to. And the last part, and I put it in bracket because some scholar think this sentence not belong here because it's unrelated talking about probably belong to other place. So we don't know. I put in the bracket. So finally, people all live purposefully, but I alone and like untamed as uneducated. Okay, so you see, education is not the gain more knowledge. Being educated is not the purpose for Taoism. Okay, I alone am different from them. I honor my wet nurse. A lot of translation translate this one as the value the mother who feed me. OK， 表示母，食母。OK， but I think about it, and very few take this translation or interpretation. I translate as wet nurse. OK， I think 食母 OK wet nurse eat mother. It's very strange. I don't see any Chinese text use this word. Okay, so I would prefer take this word as its facial meaning. That means the wet nurse, the mother, and the wet nurse in the noble society is kind of like not your mother, okay, but it's kind of servant. Okay, so here I think it fit to the entire text because people has a purpose, they value something, but I just value whoever fit me. Okay, so I value my wet nurse. Okay, I just want to take the surface. Or of course, you can have more extensive interpretation. Okay, wet nurse means or mother's breast means whoever give me the resources, and which is the nature, the great nature. So okay, so but on the surface, the word is a very strange combination of word called 食母. If you want to translate, maybe eat mother. So that's, I don't know what would be the best way to translate. I'm not sure. Okay, so right now that's Aman, please. Okay.
Thank you, Jason. And everyone, here's a little inside baseball. If you'll leave that right there so that you guys can see my parenthetical at the bottom, this is how Jason and I's translation process goes. He does a draft, I do revisions, we discuss and adopt or don't adopt. And so there are several suggestions I make to this chapter, mostly because there are real difficulties in making these translations. They don't one-to-one easily translate. Is a very difficult word to translate. It is an affirmative, but it is an affirmative with a but or also or an affirmative that indicates something else is at work there as well. And so translating it as difference between yes and no, it does speak to a Western mindset very easily because it forms a strict and immediate dichotomy. But reading it in the Chinese, what you're reading is a difference between affirmation and conditional affirmation. And so, yeah, Kevin, oh, Kevin's doing my etymology. Thank you. So yeah, I actually had a lot more wordage there, and it is more eloquent as yes and yeah, but I'm not 100% convinced people will read it and understand the difference. I might be that you need something with yeah to make it clearer. Same thing with Sao and the idea of loafing and fatigue, though I will say, Jason, you're convincing me of the idea of keeping that translation as loafing, because I am loafing as if I have no place to return. Yeah, this isn't necessarily, it does have the idea of bodily heaviness, fatigue, exhaustion, but here it is expressed as more intentional than thrust upon you. And lastly, this translation of the title, 是母, eat mother. I do think that I honor at my mother's breast works, but I'm also warming up to the idea of wet nurse because, as Jason pointed out, the position of wet nurse at this time was actually someone who might be closer to this princeling than their own mother. Mother was a distant figure who gave birth to you, but if you got a wet nurse, you're with this person every day. It reminds me of that really old movie, The Last Emperor of China, if anyone remembers that movie from the 80s. And the young emperor, who was probably 6, 7, 8 at the time, finding his wet nurse to nurse because something had gone wrong and he needed the comfort of it. And so I am warming to that translation, but I'm really curious to hear everybody else's thoughts.
Aman, this is Jenny. I just wanted to add what you just said about The Last Emperor. John Lone played The Last Emperor in that film, and I did a play off Broadway with him in 1980.
Oh,
Yeah, uh-huh.
oh, so what role you play?
It was a 3-character play, 2 men, John Lone, and let's see, John Lone and what was the other guy? And 3 of us were in the play. It was a 3-character play, 1 woman, 2 men, and I was the woman in the play off Broadway. It was called FOB by David Henry Wong, wrote the play. And then
That's
John
great.
Lone became a huge star playing that role. And
Yeah,
the Last Emperor.
that's huge. Do you want to share the clip?
Or can we get a
I think
headshot?
I think the Lincoln
Yeah.
Center Library has the filming of that play that we did at the
Oh.
New York Shakespeare Festival, the Public Theater New York Shakespeare Festival, where the most recent play that came out of the New York Shakespeare Festival is the Broadway play about the president. What is that? Anyway, it was at the New York Shakespeare Festival. Thank you for letting me interrupt you guys. Thank you, Aman.
I'm
Thank you,
glad I
Jenny.
brought it up now. I debated it in my head for a moment.
Okay, let's go this order. Darren, Kwang, and Paul. Okay, Darren, please.
First of all, I really like your translation. I think it's very helpful. And it's not very like denigrating to this person, the descriptions. I mean, there's a way in which because for instance, the Derek Lynn, he's translated as stubborn and lowly, and you guys do it as untamed, as if uneducated. So it's it's a little bit better than just being stubborn, I guess. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, I just noticed this is just a pattern here, and the difference between your translations. Regarding the yes and ya thing, the wai ji yu ho, it's so I so over Christmas I got this great like classical Chinese dictionary, the Crow. I guess I was just very enthused by these meetups. So I went all out and bought it. And according to the Crow, why one of the definitions here is to assent to, so yes, but it says here usually directed towards superior. And so I noticed the Derek Lynn, he translates this as respectful response and scornful response. How much is the difference? So I guess this could be so I can see, you know, I kind of like maybe the spin that Derek Lynn is putting on it. So one is like so and it's related to a kind of maybe attack on Confucianism or convention again, because they're all about, you know, a respect. You have to know your place in the hierarchy. So why would be the first one would be, you know, a respectful response, and you would just be like a casual, you know, yes response. So, all right. So just a couple more things. So the very last thing, the sick mo, the last 2 characters, yeah, it was helpful to know that what Jason said, that this was an unusual combination. You know, I'm not like so widely read enough to like be aware of that, but I actually think to like when Jason said that, I really like this here, because I think yeah, it is strange, right? Because when I read it, and because even with knowing like like how it's unusual, it does just sort of sound strange, because it reads like eating your mother, Sigmo. So and I think maybe the strangeness of it is like deliberate in that. So I think there could be various ways you might think about this. So it could be it could just be fitting with the whole rest of the chapter, because we're seeing this one person who is like different from the rest. So um so when he describes himself in the end, what he holds to is sick mo, eat mother. It is like something strange, like how he is sort of strange like in the rest of this chapter, right? So it sort of evokes the same feeling. So it fits the context of this. I think it could also like the strangeness of it. It's like when, in any language, in poetry, like sometimes like the poet would use like a very use very suddenly very unusual word or word choice, and that sort of just draws your attention to it, right? That there's something significant and important here. So he's doing that. He could be doing that as well. But this is the last thing I just thought. Okay, there's many ways you could probably go about this, but this is related to what Madeline was saying earlier. So this is a thread, a train of thought that's been carrying through here. Like, yeah, it is like if it's an unusual combination, it's not like a Chinese word, right? These two characters, they don't form a typical word. So it could be that again, what Madeline was saying, like this is something that goes on in Taoism, the anti-conceptual idea that he's holding to something. He doesn't want you to think he's holding to another concept that's like another Confucian concept you can analyze like a philosophy, and you can, you can be all intellectual and cognitive about it. He intentionally chooses this very weird combination of words to like suggest a meaning that you can grasp, but it's not a typical concept or word. So you sort of have to think about it and be confused about it a bit. So it could be so he concludes with these two characters to sort of make another sort of anti-conceptual point about, he doesn't just want to draw another concept like the wet. He doesn't want to use the term for wet nurse or whatever, because it would just be, it won't, it won't be making all these interesting, mean points that you could do with just making up this weird, this strange combination. Anyway, okay, the last thing is very short. I just have a question for everyone. I was wondering if this thing he says in this chapter over and over. Okay, I'm looking at the Derek Lin. I'll have to go back. What do you guys say? Hang on, let me just say. So he says he's alone. Yeah, you guys do it too. You guys say I alone, right? So he says I alone all the time. What do people make of this idea that like this is like that he's saying this? It's almost like he is the only person like this. So like what does this what does this mean to people? Like, is it literally I alone, or like why does he say I alone out of all the people am this? So this is a question. I mean, I'll be interested to hear what people think. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Okay, first, this chapter is very special. Okay, just like Darren talked about. See how many times they use I alone, 我独. Okay, and I alone, I have to translate as I alone, right? Keep I alone, right? How many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, right? So it's okay. I think that's a good question to think about it. Okay. Second, when Darren talk about, we translate as untamed, as if uneducated, because the original text use very strong word. 我读, okay, I alone. 玩是比, okay, that's a very strong word. One means, okay, when we call a naughty boy, okay, we will use this word. That means untamed, okay, rebellious, okay, but the original means untamed, okay. So in today's Chinese, you call the boy, or usually boy, not girl, okay, are very naughty, okay, rebellious, okay, bad boy, okay. You use this word. 比, okay, it means uneducated person, 比人, okay. So in Confucius Analect, you see the person who is 比, okay, that means uneducated, uncultured. So it's a very strong word they use. So I translate as untamed, as if uneducated. Okay, so I think that's some comment I have. So Kwang and Paul. Kwang, please.
Yes, I have many comments, but I will start with Darren's interrogation about the I am alone. In ancient China, the emperor called himself Guaran, okay, the person who is alone, or the person who is dispossessed. Here, this alone is not the words of someone who is depressed. On the contrary, this alone is someone, depending on your judgment on him, very wise or very pretentious. Because this I am alone means that he see himself at the apex of the epistemological development, meaning that he has absolute full awareness. That is when he was talking of the others as Suran, meaning the vanguard. And what does he mean by the vanguard? He means the person or the people involved in the rat race, the people at the courts, the people in the offices, the people in the markets, the people who are prisoner of the desires for objects, for glory, for reputation, and for learning. That's what he meant by the Suran. The people who are victim of the kingly game defined by the Confucianist rituals. So, and from here, I would like to come back to the very beginning of, well, to the title, Shu Mu. Okay, Shu Mu is not eat mother. Shu Mu is food mother, the mother that brings food. Or if you prefer, I like very much the translation by Professor Mus Roberts, life-giving mother. Okay, life at the basic meaning, meaning food and shelter and stuff like that. But here, let's not forget, it's a Taoist masters. Okay, so life-giving mother means the life of infinite awareness, of the beauty, of the power that would give to you if you abide in infinite awareness rather than be prisoner of the rules of the kingly game. So it's a very beautiful stanza, and it makes me think a little bit about what Jason repeated many times that I think very funny. That when you talk to the parents of their children, never say that they are Wu Wei, but that they are Yo Wei. Okay, meaning that they have a direction in life. Okay, Yo Wei. Because if you say that they are Wu Wei, meaning that they are purposeless in life, which is very beautiful in Taoism, but not in ordinary life. Okay, so well, it's about that precisely. Okay, because in ordinary life, Yo Wei means that you have a purpose in the rat race. I'm sorry to say it very bluntly, but if someone in ordinary society say that you have a purpose in life, you want to go to medical school, you want to go to engineering school, you want to become a teacher, well, your way, you have a purpose in life, you want to have a rank within that society. Okay, so that is normal, and that is, I don't see no problem with that. Once again, in my way of seeing the epistemological development, I think that we have to go through a phase of your way, okay, having purposes as defined by the kingly game, and who are the person who would give us the first rules of the kingly game? Well, it's our own parents. And after that, and that's why the parents don't want the others people to say that their children are Wu Wei, but rather Yo Wei. And after that, there is an evolution in the mentality and the maturity, let's say, that maybe certain people would escape the rat race. I want to, and I would like to finish by a small irony against Taoist masters. Because if those Taoist masters are so Wu Wei, why do they insist to write a book? Because a book is within the rank of the kingly game. I stop here.
Yep. If Taoists have said, those who know don't speak, and those who speak don't know, why are we such blabbermouths?
Well, I have a different opinion on that. I think that's because the Dao De Jing is, I believe it's not by one person. That's a combination of many texts, many authors through over probably 200 years from pre-Confucius time to warring state, which means after 200 years after Confucius time. So the teaching is different. So Wu Wei is teaching to the ruler, okay, not to your kids. Okay, so That I think to teach again. That's a teach to your manager, not for the regular employee. So I think that's my interpretation. Paul, please.
That's a perfect segue, Jason, to what I'm curious if others have the impression I got in reading this, in you reading it, which was like so dramatic. Like, what is this thing in first person with a whole set of different rhetorical devices that are very much, as a writer, I think of more like poetic devices that like it is completely out of character with the rest of what we've come across so far. Like, who would even imagine that that's the same guy? That was one of my questions to you. Like, why aren't we bringing that up? Like, I almost think they should have knocked it out of the whole book, because it's sort of like you say, well, he had his interpretation, but it's not very pure. Anyway, that's one sort of question, comment to hear your thoughts on. And the other is on yeah, yes. So as a, just sort of giving you my reaction, what is the difference between yes and yeah, which is what the first line actually says? To me, it just is very clear. It has nothing to do with certainty. It's formal versus informal. So in the Oval Office, just like some presidents would have you wear a suit as opposed to not wear a suit, you should say yes in the Oval Office, not yeah, but you could be just as certain. Now, I don't know if that is what you want to portray by choosing that translation, formal versus informal, but it's nothing to do with certainty in my mind. It's all about formality versus informality. So those are my comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. I've been thinking about this one, your second question. Okay, the Chinese word called wei and right? Okay, that it's very difficult to translate. Okay, I read this one, wei means only. Okay, not yes, only. Okay, because another use is only if only. Means not sure things. Okay, but it also means wei also means yes, and also means so. It's I have to admit it's very difficult and very confused. But anyway, I based on the second line, good and evil or beautiful and ugly. So I think the text try to talk about two things the opposite. So you can say formal and informal, but probably misleading because I'm not sure in the ancient time, Chinese they have formal, informal, this kind of language in writing. I'm not very sure. So I just will say I have a big question mark on that. And your first comment about this chapter, yes, it reads as poetry, totally poetry, and it just express some feeling. It's it doesn't fit to the other 80 chapter. Let's put it this way. It's a little bit, it's very different than others. So I'm not sure how other people think about this, but that's just my theory. Madeline, okay, please.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Aman. To me, this felt like this chapter felt like a moment of raw vulnerability in which a Taoist is saying, this is what it feels like to follow the Tao in the midst of the world. And it's like a gift. And the whole thing really is there's a sense of generosity to the Dao De Jing, that these people had this. They had something. They didn't have to write it down, but it was almost like a message to the future or a message to others to keep doing this and to engage in the dialogue. As far as the ending goes, the wet nurse versus the mother's breast, I like the mother's breast better because in contemporary culture now, in the context of the Tao, it implies a return to something truly primal, like to the Yin Valley in one of the earlier chapters. I think but it's a matter of just whether you want to interpret it for those of us reading now, or if you want to make it part of the historical or cultural context notes of what it would have been like for the people of the time and the readers of this, in which case it would have been the wet nurse. So I think they're both legitimate. It just depends on what perspective you want to present.
Thank you, Madam. Darren, please.
Yeah, I love Madeline's idea here that this chapter is conveys something of raw vulnerability. I love that, and it actually kind of goes well with what Quan was saying, because I like Quan's idea too, that like the idea of the one eye alone evokes something like the emperor. Although of course this is a very different idea of one, but it evokes the idea of one because he alone, is the one who like rules over everyone. There can only be one person. So like there's something very like fragile about it when you combine it with what Madeline was saying. Yeah, it's like this one alone, like so powerful, but also this like suggesting something vulnerability in this new idea of being a Taoist person, being in the world, and that's sort of what maybe something that feels like this like strange juxtaposition of like feelings. Yeah, I really like that. Thank you, everyone. I just want to say, and just so Madeline's second comment was actually related to what I wanted to say. But I actually just thought of this as Madeline was talking about the breast, because Mo, the very last character, is actually a picture of nipples and breasts. So if you look at it, so there's that going for it. Is very clear depiction there. And then, but the thing I wanted to say though originally is I still think because I think Quan was saying it's maybe sick. The second last character is sick. I think it's Chur in Mandarin, right? is maybe saying something like food. I still like the idea that it's actually about eating, like the verb. It's like eating mother. So I like the idea. It's like deliberately strange and maybe challenge, and there's something anti-conceptual going on here. But the thing I wanted to add, I guess, is yeah, basically what Madeline was saying. I think the idea of sick mo, eat mother, is there's something very bodily about it and very sort of down to earth and earthy about it, that is a contrast with all the other things that people are going about, trying to make a profit and all that stuff. And then at the very last two characters, he brings it down to like the most earthy thing, sick mo. And there's also something just very crude about it. It's like eat mother, like that's how you're going to describe it. But like the crudeness is almost like deliberate, right? It's a contrast with the sort of all the cultivation and learning and abstractions that are going on in the rest of this chapter that he's contrasting himself to. He's calls himself confused and all this other muddled and all this other stuff. There's something. So it's sick mo is very like concrete, and it's almost deliberately crude to contrast with learning and abstraction. And this actually connects with this might actually be, if you see it this way, this would actually suggest that the very first line that Jason was talking about, that's we're not sure if it belongs here, ju ho mo yao, that's in Cantonese, the cease learning, no more worries. That actually would totally relate, because it's sort of like a beginning and end. They're sort of like, they sort of hold the thing together, hold that chapter together, because he starts off saying cease learning, no more worries, and then at the very end he deliberately chooses these two words, which is like kind of suggesting something crude, and someone's crude and unlearned, sick mo, eat mother. And so it's like this nice contrast, it sort of wraps up the point that he begins with, if that first line belongs in this chapter. And just very quickly, last thing, so again, related to the sick mo thing, this like very earthy bodily suggestion, it could also tell regarding the lines about the ocean and the wind, because if you read these as suggesting something like very grounded and like material, then the ocean and wind stuff, that line totally belongs here, and it's also a contrast with the very first line that people debate, cease learning, because so the whole chapter is suggesting this kind of contrast which really comes forth in this weird expression at the very last two characters. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Darren. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, likewise, I also like to comment on the last character's translation. But before I do that, I want to make a general point about this stanza. I think that in the mainstream academic interpretation debated on how to read this stanza. You could read it metaphysically, or you could read it metaphorically, metaphor as a metaphor. But clearly, we shouldn't read it literally. So in that spirit, coming to the last few characters, I read actually the last three characters. I think the important one is not the last two. We may disagree on the precise meaning of the last two, but it's not very important. The philosophically important character actually is the third one from the last. Third one from that. In Chinese, gui. I don't know how Jason and Amen, you translated.
Which
You
is
say
as
honor.
Honor, yeah.
Or value,
Yeah,
esteem.
value and yeah.
Whatever, you put a premium on it. You not only you just put premium on it, you think that he is the most important value. Why? As a newly born baby, what is the first priority? Without even thinking. The natural drive to subsist, to survive, to want to eat, to want to get nutrition. So where do you get it? So I think that's the message. That is what metaphysically or metaphorically Laozi is talking about. This I is not an I as a lonely genius, complaining I'm different from no, this I is that person that is accessing the Tao, that is communicating the value within the Tao system, to get to the fundamental, the first principle, what the Greek would say, the archeis. So I think that's a message, and that's what should be understood. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Darren, please. Darren, please.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, regarding that interpretation, the I here, what Nick was saying, I wonder if like the so he says I alone, right? So it's not just the I alone, and he repeats this over and over. I actually wonder if this could also be seen as something. So I liked things everyone has said about this already. But I wonder if in addition it might be seen as again, like related to how the contrast between learning and abstraction and versus something very concrete, because I alone, like the most concrete thing is like me, I alone. Like other people are sort of, society, other people are sort of abstractions. So it might not mean literally I alone. It just means phenomenologically I alone. Like, because I alone, that is the most concrete thing to me. My individual, my feeling, my body, my bodily feelings, my perceptions of other people. That's also my I alone. No one has my perceptions of other people. So it could also tie in with this, like, yeah, this contrast between learning and abstraction that seems to be going he's against here, and versus something very concrete, just like eat mother or wind and so on. I just a very last quick point here. I was looking at the second last character, sick. Sure. So that's eat. So that is also a very sort of bodily pictorial representation, by the way. So it might lead to the thing, might suggest that bit of might lean towards my reading of what's going on here. So just like mo is of breast and nipple, sik is of like a mouth, which is a top part, eating like grain or something. So, you know, and actually, if you look at the ancient form, I can post a link there, but the ancient form, like of Mo, both these two characters, Sik and Mo, are like even more pictorial, right? Like, because, you know, these characters have changed, you know, a lot. So they're just very directly. So again, the last two characters is something suggesting something very directly concrete, and, you know, to the point that it even sounds crude, and he doesn't want to use any learned language. He's just going to say "eat mother," and it even looks that way when you look at the characters. So, okay.
It could be means eat from the mother, right? Okay, eat from mother, because
Yeah,
if
yeah, that's what I.
because the
Yeah,
Chinese usually, and in Chinese had lack of the preposition. Okay, so from would be missing, right? So eat from mother. Okay,
Yeah.
so
No, I
it
agree.
could be
I think
this.
I think that's the meaning we're supposed to take from it. I totally agree.
Yeah,
But I'm saying
yeah.
that like because it's so unusual in the way, you know, you were
Yeah,
saying.
it's very unusual. And
Yeah,
this
but
words doesn't show up in any text, I believe.
yeah,
时, okay.
I
Okay,
think
it's
that's
not show
fascinating.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be mistaken. Okay, mistaken. Could be
Okay.
some, yeah, it's very
The spider
possible.
strikes again, the spider leg.
Yeah.
The only other
And
thing oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, let me continue. Okay, so I'd
Go
like to
ahead.
comment on Darren talking about 我独, I alone. Okay. So well, a little personal philosophy I impose here because I am very individualistic in philosophy against collectivism. Okay, so that's my personal belief. And when I read this one, I do see I alone represent individualism. Okay, so I am myself. Okay, so I don't have to be same as other people. That's why a lot of words show up just opposite to I alone. 众人, okay, people, all other people. 俗人, ordinary people. It shows up many times as many. So every time they talk about others, they talk about myself. It doesn't mean I am the one only different. That means I believe I'm myself alone. Nick is him alone. Darren is Darren alone. Madeline is Madeline alone. So everybody is different. That's what I read on this one. So sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh.
wanted to echo what Jason was saying real quick about this idea, and something that Madeline touched on about the vulnerability and was talked about by Quan about the ritualism of Confucianism. So we just seen in 18 and 19 a takedown of the Confucian norms that were predominant. There is something very lonely about standing against the crowd that says this is the way, and actually saying you are wrong. You are wrong. This is not the way. This is your way, but there is a way that's greater, and I seem to be the only one who gets it. So yeah, as a teacher to a princeling who's had lessons from Confucian scholars shoved down his throat since forever, he'd be talking in terms of, look, I alone am doing something very different here, and it's hard, and it can be a little lonely, but it is more nurturing and more valuable and fulfills me like an infant at a mother's breast more than all the rest of this book learning you've been spending your time on.
Okay, thank you, Amam. Okay, right now we have time. Darren,
Okay,
final
I'll make
word.
this quick. Yeah, we're at time. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to respond what you were saying, Jason. Yeah, so I think yeah, the thing you were saying about individualism, like I think that is something people like associate with Taoism more, like obviously much more than Confucianism. It's like that's association people make. And I guess I guess for me, like what would be its relation to chapter 20 would be that you see where it's coming from. It's like coming from a place that's like that's again like again just going by my own reading of this so far, is like it comes from it emerges from the sense that this is the most concrete thing, like that it is, you know, it is bodily and concrete, like I alone. I can only have an I alone, and everyone else has their own I alone. So it's a contrast with like learning and cultivation and abstractions like society and all the stuff Confucius himself talks about. So the last thing I want to say regarding this is I think it's also related to an idea we saw more in the previous chapter, which is the end of the chapter 19, which is authenticity, because he says here, I alone. He calls himself, you know, muddled, whereas other people, ordinary people, are bright. I alone am muddled. And he calls himself, you know, has a heart of a fool, and he says he's ignorant. You know, he doesn't know a lot. Like all these things, I just feel like, yeah, like maybe this comes back to what Madeline was saying about the vulnerability here, right? But I guess I'm just like linking it to the previous chapter. Like this is another ongoing theme that you see emerge here. That, you know, it is something about that's authenticity, and that is related to concreteness, because it's like genuinely authentically seeing, knowing yourself, you know, like there's nothing more concrete than that. And 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 the authenticity there is that, you know, we are sort of like muddled and and fools, and there's a lot we don't know about this huge wide universe. That's just being honest with ourselves. So the all these things sort of, I guess I can see them going together, right? Individualism, concreteness, authenticity, and, you know, and its contrast with all the stuff about Confucian stuff about society, abstractions, concepts, names, and all that stuff. So yeah, just I feel like it all really comes together here. Anyway, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And today we have a pretty good discussion on totally different concept of morality, individual, you know, chapter 19 and 20. So thank you very much. And next week we will same time, and then we will start from 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Amon.
You.
Thank you very much, Jason Lamont.
Thank you.